Hello and welcome back to Big Discussions. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar. I am the owner of this channel and I am the founder and the creator of the Big Words blog site. The information for my blog is on the banner of my channel, as is all of my social media contact info. Please follow me at those various sites depending upon what your preference is. Please subscribe to the blog or add the link to my RSS feed to your emails feed reader so you can get the content as it gets published. And I'm publishing quite a bit now. So today is June 30th, 2019, and we are just about at the halfway point for this year. So the first half of this year has really flown by. It's been an interesting year thus far, and I started my YouTube journey back in January during the government shutdown. So it's been an exciting journey thus far. As of today, I'm up to 56 subscribers, and I'm looking to continue to grow the channel. And in my mind, I've kind of set a goal, a 1-year goal of reaching 100 or beyond. So, you know, those of you who have subscribed and those of you who regularly watch my content, I want to thank you, and I want to ask you that you continue watching. Please continue to click the like button and share it if something I say or present resonates with you, or if you think that it can help someone else. And so once again, my goal is to get to 100 subscribers by January 2020. Before I move on, I actually have there's a milestone I can hit before then that you could help me with, who's ever watching this. And a number of my videos are sitting at 9 likes, so I have a regular crew of people who are supporting my stuff, and I thank you for that. But I would like to get some of those videos up into double digits, so 10 and beyond. And the most recent video is the video I shot around Father's Day, which is called Growing Up Without My Father in Our Home. And I did a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 is sitting at 9 likes right now. I'd like to get that one up above 10. I'm also, or should I say that video is also significant because it talks about my father. And this video right here will actually bring my father back in as well, and you will see why. Before I jump into that, I just want to say that this video is historic in a way in that I'm not dressed in a t-shirt or something very casual. I'm a little more formal. Shout out to big brother Kevin Samuels. I actually did go to church this morning. That's why I'm dressed like this, and I figured I would wear this in the video as well. But you know, Kevin Samuels, I have become a lot more conscious of my image since watching Kevin Samuels content, and you know, more conscious of accessorizing and fragrances and just image in general. So he's a really solid content creator in terms of image and style. So let's jump into this video, and I hope not to go too long because it's nice outside, and I want to go back outside and get out and around a little bit. So the title of this video is a few tips for welcoming adult children back home. And as you will see, I have actually borrowed this title from someone else. I've been wanting to take this video for a while, for at least the last 2 to 3 weeks, because it's a topic for me that really hits home, and it's something that I actually lived and experienced. My channel, I like to think of it as an everything channel. So while I have a science background, I will also tell stories and visit topics related to money and other practical aspects, as well as money and financial literacy is something that fascinates me, and it's something that I think about all the time as well. And as I'll describe, it's something that I'm studying whenever I get the chance in my busy schedule. Let's see. So a couple weeks ago, my mother was here, and I think she was. I think one of the things she pointed out with my place was that I have things posted on my walls here, and different notes and different reminders. Like I have stuff here from in my work area from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I have some post-its from a a woman named Deborah Velez Aguiar, or Aguiar Velez. She came to my job a couple years ago and gave a wealth building seminar. So I have some of her notes here, and I have other reminders, and I have the 5 economic / business cycles. I have the 6 aftershock financial bubbles, just because I wanted to learn about money. And I got this from my father. You know, when I would go visit my father, he has things all over his walls, reminders, things from his past, different notes, some that are relevant, some that aren't. So this is something I got from him. And one of the notes I have on my wall here in my work area is the 5 financial intelligences. And I got these from Robert Kiyosaki. So, and I'm going to use these as a jumping off point for this talk, or for this video. And if you haven't, please click the thumbs up button, click the like button. If you can, help me out that way. So the 5 financial intelligences are making more money, protecting your money, budgeting your money, leveraging your money, and finally improving your financial information. So those are the 5 financial intelligences. So I'm going to jump off with the last point, which is improving your financial information. So in addition to reading numerous books on money, I regularly read the Washington Post, and I actually get it delivered to my door every Sunday. And politically, I'm an independent. I'm not a liberal. I've heard that the Washington Post is a liberal publication, but I mostly focus on the business section. And because I think I'm close to being ready to invest in the stock market. So I'm always looking for little tidbits and any bits of knowledge that I can get to help me get there and pull the trigger in terms of buying stock or some other investment. But there's a contributor in the Washington Post who I've been following for a while and whose column I look out for on a regular basis. And her name is Michelle Singletary. And what's the name of her column? Her column's called The Color of Money. So Michelle regularly writes for the Washington Post, and she's got her own thing going on as well. If you're interested about that, I think she calls her movement Financial Fast, and she attends one of the bigger churches here in the D.C. area. But she writes very compelling content in the Washington Post about money-related topics. And this particular topic, this particular title, was the title for this video, this is who I borrowed it from. A few tips for welcoming adult children back home. So, and so this video is for everybody, because I think everybody has dealt with this in some way, and I'm going to describe that shortly. So this is for a very broad audience. So how have people dealt with this, welcoming adult children back home? Well, in some instances, some children never leave. And not having never been a parent myself, this is something I've seen via observation. So in some instances, some kids maybe were learning disabled and will be forever dependent upon their parents, so they've never left. And then there are some kids who were not given the proper tools to leave, and they weren't prepared to launch, as they say. So those kids never left, or they left and they crashed and burned and they quickly went back home to mom and dad, or in these days, mom or dad. There are some kids who went to college at home, and so they never left for that reason. I know I have a Pakistani friend at my current job, and she's from this area, and she stayed in this area with her family, in her culture, and just, I guess, paid her tuition and did her schooling here, so she never left. And culturally, something she shared with me is that Pakistani families, they all share the expenses together, and the oldest brother usually assumes, he tends to take on the patriarch role after a while. So, to make a long story short, with her staying home, she didn't have to pay rent, or she probably contributed something to the home and to the collective, but she never, up until the point she got married, because this woman got married, she didn't have to assume those big bills before she completed her education. And then after she completed her education, she stayed with the family some more. And in that culture, I think that particularly the girls stay with the family until they marry out, which is very different than what Western culture has become today. I know a friend of a friend out in the Bay Area. This woman went to college. She stayed at home, I think, up until she married her husband. And all she did was just stack her money. And so when her and her husband got married, they got into the real estate game because she had a stack of cash that was ready to go and invest. So there are a lot of people who stay at home to go to college and they move out later. And then there are the rest of us who go away to college. And before I segue into that, I'm going to bring up one of my favorite writers and speakers, Dr. Thomas Sowell. And one of his famous quotes is that life is a series of trade-offs. So we're going to do this at the expense of doing this, or we're going to take advantage of this at the expense of taking advantage of this. Excuse me. And so when you go away to college, again, you're going away. You're getting that experience of being away. You're getting that freedom, if that's one of the things you're looking for. But it's not going to be forever. At some point you're going to graduate, and then you have to figure out what you're going to do after you graduate. And depending upon your situation, if you didn't come from money, you may be starting from scratch in terms of building your own empire and building your own finances and building your own estate. So you have to eventually get out, start paying bills, start building your credit. You have to start saving your money somehow. And that's impacted by any number of things. It's impacted by how much your parents contribute to you when you're in college. It depends on what your credit score looks like when you finish college, and it depends on how much you're willing to save, in the process, so that you can easily transition this into something else for your next step. So there are any number of factors that affect what happens to you once you complete your bachelor's or your PhD or your master's or your MD or your JD or whatever it is. So what happens to a lot of us is once we finish the education, we have to do something. We have to figure out what that next step is. And in some instances, that involves moving back home. Some students can't find jobs in their given field. Some students maybe find a job or an internship at home where mom and dad live. There are some students may have flunked out of school and they need to go and regroup. And so there are any number of reasons to go back. Another reason kids go back, in some instances, mom and dad get sick and they need help and they're elderly and you need to go and assist them. And that's a very noble thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But the focus of this video is what happens when you've been educated or you've been out and employed and you have to go back. So I'm going to transition into what happened to me. Once again, if you're watching this, please get the likes up. Please help me out in that way. So I'm going to start by just reading off some of the main points from Michelle's article here. So, and you could probably find this online if you Google her and Google the title. So some of her main bullet points here are, let's see, set an initial timeline. So this is to be worked out between parent and child, adult child. Monitor the job search process. So I could say that me and my father, when I moved in with him, as I'll discuss, I don't think we set a timeline. Monitor the job search. This is something that he started doing toward the end before I moved out. Be clear about their financial responsibilities. This was left kind of vague, as I'll describe, and there were ramifications for that. Talk about their discretionary spending. This was also an area that was left kind of vague, and we didn't talk about that, and there were ramifications for that, as I'll discuss shortly. And I think that was the last one. So those were her main bullet points from this article, and I would encourage you to look this up and read this. So once again, please get the likes up. Let's see. So before I go on, a lot of my stories, as I tell these stories, because I'm a storyteller, they all kind of go together and they all kind of link in some way. So even though I record these things at different dates and times about different eras of my life, they all connect in certain ways. So to just get a feel for what my father-son relationship has been like as I've grown up, go check out those two videos, Growing Up Without My Father in the Home, Part 1 and Part 2. But, basically, when I left graduate school, when I finished graduate school, defended my dissertation at the University of Michigan, I finished and I had this PhD. I was now Dr. Dunbar. But to make a long story short, I didn't have any money. And so, and I'm very adamant about this because we get caught up on titles, we get caught up on the prestige of these different things. And that's why I made two earlier videos about whether or not your degree translates into wealth. I'm very passionate about this. And I basically finished, and my finances were basically decimated and destroyed, or broke. They weren't destroyed, but they just weren't in a good place. The graduate stipend at the University of Michigan, and my major when I started was $17,500, and when I finished, it had raised slightly to $22,500, which I remember one classmate said we were living on the poverty line, or we were living in poverty. It was, if you were smart with the money, if you had roommates, you could have stretched it out. I decided to live alone that entire time, and another serious thing that impacted my finances was the girlfriend that I took on towards the end of my dissertation. And so this was someone, I'll just say that this was someone who had very defined and rigid and high expectations for what a man should financially do for her. And she wasn't understanding of the fact that I was in school doing my dissertation, and I just didn't have a lot of money. I think she was, we were both banking on my potential. And the flip side of that is it was partially me too. When I realized that this wasn't a good situation, and that this person was asking more of me in that area that I could do at that time, I did not have a strong enough frame to back out of that situation and just say goodbye. I hung in there and tried to live up to this person's expectations, and as a result, one of the things I did was I took out a city assist loan, a $3,000 city assist loan, which was designed to kind of provide a little financial buffer for graduate students. But I used that to date this person, and we blew through the whole $3,000 by the time my dissertation was over. We didn't. We eventually broke up, as you might expect, and I moved out to. I got a postdoctoral position at Albany, New York, in Albany, New York, which is where I was born. And I'm going to talk some more about what a postdoc is and the significance for my science career later on. But at this point, suffice it to say that I found a research project that I wanted to work on out in Albany, New York, which is consequently where I was born and which is consequently where my father had settled. So life had kind of presented us, after him not being in the home due to circumstance, life presented us with a chance to kind of catch up on lost time and bond and live together. And so I decided to take this postdoctoral training position, and he said, hey, you can come stay with me. And he said, you don't have to pay any rent while you're here. And he said, you could stay as long as you want. And so after going through what I'd gone through in graduate school and in that relationship, I said, wow, okay, now I'm going to get a slight increase. I think the standard salary for postdocs at that time was $37,000. So I said, okay, I can take that money, I can stack it, I could do a bunch of different things now that I couldn't do before, because he said I didn't have to pay rent. So at this point, I want to mention a former classmate named Greg. And Greg, if he watches this, he will know who he is. Greg is not his real name. But before I left the lab, before I moved, me and Greg, we were really close. And Greg told me, he said, I know your father said that you don't have to pay him any rent. He said, but once you get there and you get settled, I would toss your father $100 a month. And I said, Greg, what are you talking about? He said, I've been living broke these last couple of years. I finally have some wiggle room now. I just want to save. And Greg said, Anwar, he said, I know that, that's fine. But, this was with a stern look on his face, he said, I would toss your dad, $100 a month, once a month, while you're there. So I said, okay. So I took that in the back of my mind, and I went out to the Albany area, our state capital, New York State, got settled, started my postdoc, and I was still paying off my old Saturn, my old 1996 Saturn SL2. We used my dad's credit card a couple of years earlier to buy that, so I still had to kick my father $200 a month, and I didn't do a good job tracking what I was paying him. My mother dinged on me about that, but I wanted to pay that off before I started paying him the money. Greg, where did I get Gary from? I wanted to start paying him. I wanted to pay the car off before I was able to comfortably start paying him that $100 my classmate Greg recommended. So that took a while. Staying with my father, it was cool at first. We did kind of have that lost bonding time that we missed out on during my childhood. And then things slowly but surely changed, and they shifted to something else. And I'm going to be careful about what I say here. I got the car paid off, and I did start giving him the $100 a month, and I did kick in for groceries and other things we needed there, like toilet tissue. We both used that. Dad liked potato chips, and we both liked kettle chips, and so I would pitch in for other incidentals around the house, and I had chores that I needed to do, like taking out the garbage and those kinds of things. So it's not like I was staying there and not giving anything and not contributing anything. But what I want to say is that there is something about being a man and being grown and contributing. And I remember years earlier when my brother started college, my brother stayed at home and attended the University of Buffalo. And I had gone away to Johnson C. Smith at the time. And when I came back, I realized that my mother was charging my brother rent. And at the time, it was the strangest thing. And I said, Mom, you're charging my brother rent. How could you do that? She said, well, he's 18 and he's able-bodied and he can contribute something to the home. So this is something I've been trying to tell my 16-year-old godson, who I don't think he's been properly prepared to launch just yet. But as I've been observing, looking at other people that I know, in addition to my own experiences and listening to some women talk, for example, there's something about a man contributing and pulling his weight. And there's something that makes people upset about when a man is staying somewhere and he's not contributing. So even though, my father said that I didn't have to pay rent, I think that at some point some resentment started to build for numerous reasons. Michelle said you should talk about discretionary spending. Well, I've mentioned this in past videos. I was a pretty hardcore salsa dancer, and that started when I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan. And now that I was closer to New York City, I was going down to New York City regularly to dance, and I was dancing a lot in Albany. And I would, there were some Sundays when I go to this thing called the Jimmy Anton Social, and all the salsa dancers know what that is and why that's important. So I would regularly get on the train 1 to 2 times a month, go down to New York City, dance and have a good time, and I would come back up. And I just think that something happened along the way where he was happy to have me there, but then at some point he wanted me to go. And it was mutual because of the living conditions. I think at some point I was ready to go. And I think that because of the lost time, I think that there were some areas where he felt like he should catch up on, and where he felt like he should parent me on, which made for some unhealthy dynamics at times. A big thing for me was that I didn't have my own room. And so if there was something I would add on to Michelle's article, it's that if you're going to move back in with a parent, or if you're going to move in with a parent, because I'd never lived with my father before, at my mother's house, my room is still there. So I just go home and I just crash in that room. But I never had a room at my father's house. So he had to prepare for me to come. And I'll just say that he didn't necessarily prepare for me to come. So I was staying in his room. And so because it was his room, his clothes were in there. He was coming in that room all the time, even early in the morning, and he had a prayer ritual. And so he would come in the room at a certain time in the morning and he would do this prayer ritual. And to make a long story short, I just didn't have any privacy. So the entire time I was there, we were kind of living on top of each other, so to speak, which wasn't healthy. And I think at times it was frustrating for the both of us to have that going on. And having your own room is critical for any number of reasons. Probably the biggest one is just privacy. During that time when I was there, I started reading the Rich Dad Poor Dad series, and I joined a real estate investment club there. And I started thinking about money, and I started thinking about investing, and I started thinking about financial freedom. And when you read these books, one of the things they tell you is that you should write your dream down and you should post it somewhere so you can look at it every day and remind yourself of what your dream is. And so I took that advice and I wrote my dream down, which was to be financially free by the time I was 40. And I posted it up in the bedroom there. And because he was coming in and out of the room all the time, he saw it. And I didn't think that much of it at the time. But fast forward another 5 to 6 years after I moved out, he and I were having a discussion about something on a visit. And he pulled that out of nowhere because my dad remembers everything. And you never know when he's going to pull something out. And he basically threw it in my face in kind of a mocking way, as if to say, yeah, you had a dream of doing this, being financially free by 40. And it was as if to say, you didn't get this dream done. It was a foolish dream, and you were foolish for even thinking about doing something like that. And it really hurt me when he did that. I will probably talk about this in another video about how that goal was attainable, had certain things been in place. But for now, just know that it was hurtful when he did that. And that in large part happened because I didn't have my own room or my own space in the house. So I'm just going to leave that there. So if you're going to move in with a parent, that's something you should talk about ahead of time. Will you have privacy? In addition to those things that Michelle talked about in her article. At some point, I did ponder moving out. I was there for 2.5 years, and I did ponder moving out and getting my own place because, my mother asked me, when she heard about some of the things that were going on, and when my brother heard about some of the things that were going on, the question was, well, why don't you just go and get your own place? Just get your own place. And I actually pondered that for a little while, but based upon what my bills were, I had to start paying my student loan. When I did it on paper, a rent payment at that time would have just taken up too much of my take home. So the math didn't add up. And my goal was to move out. When I moved out was to have enough money and to never have to ask my father for any money again. Because I didn't want to, I was Dr. Dunbar now, and I shouldn't be asking, I felt like I shouldn't be asking my parents for anything at that point. So my goal was to move out and not have to ask him for anything else. And so I wanted to have enough money saved up. I had another friend back in Michigan named Randy. And Randy, if he watches this, he will know who he is. I want to credit Randy for this. Randy encouraged me to stay. He said, Anwar, he said, I know it's hard. I know it's difficult staying with a parent. But, when you move out, you're going to have money. You're going to have money to move into your new place. You're going to have a pot of cash that's going to allow you to start up somewhere else. So at a time when a lot of other people were encouraging me to move out, Randy encouraged me to stay. And Randy actually went through the same thing himself. He attended Xavier University in Louisiana, and he returned back to Detroit and moved in with his parents while he worked on his master's degree. So he even said it was kind of weird living back with his parents, and his parents were, after a while, were putting pressure on him in certain ways, and it's not always necessarily an optimal situation. But I want to thank Randy for encouraging me to tough it out, because when you're going through something hard, you need the encouragement from somebody out there. You know what? The last thing I'll say about this is that, we're fascinated with degrees and titles, and we're fascinated with achievements and accolades. But when I defended my thesis and I became Dr. Dunbar, I didn't feel like Dr. Dunbar. And one of the reasons is I didn't have any money. And, that played into also the experience of moving in with my father, because when you're not contributing or you're not able to contribute, you don't necessarily feel whole and you don't necessarily feel accomplished. And for men, these degrees and these accomplishments, you usually need the money and the financial resources to back up that title. So if you're going for a PhD or an MD, that's just something to keep in mind. That when you go become Dr. So-and-so, the amount of financial resources you have are going to impact how you feel about yourself, and it's going to impact how people look at you as well. I think I'm at the end here, and I just when Michelle wrote this resonated with me, and I wanted to just kind of piggyback and add on to it. And I'm going to close this by saying that I'm a natural storyteller, and I like telling these stories because I think that they might help. There's a potential that it might help save someone else from going through the same thing. I'm very big on that. But I don't tell these stories to embarrass myself or my family. But I do them, well, it's in part therapeutic for me. I can look back at these things and laugh a little bit now. But I think, again, these are done to help people and maybe to prevent people from making the same mistakes or going through the same issues. Sometimes they're unavoidable, and we all have our paths to walk in life, but if I can help someone avoid some of these pitfalls, I like to do it. So with that, I'm going to conclude. Please like the video, please share it, and please subscribe to this channel. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please watch out for the next video. I have some cool things on the way coming out soon. And with that, I will conclude, and remember that your attitude determines your altitude in life. So take care. Bye-bye.